body and grinding down the single.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the eve of her big undisputed win over Jessica McCaskill, Chantel Cameron emerges as a front runner for a Katie Taylor fight next year at Croke Park. People are calling for it now, more so than they ever have in the past. And that's mostly because it makes more sense now than it ever has in the past. Chantel Cameron is now her division's undisputed champion, just north of Katie Taylor, who campaigns down there at lightweight. And if Katie were going to move up in weight for anybody, Chantel Cameron would make the most sense. The opportunity to become a two-time undisputed champion. I know when I say this, almost immediately, Claressa Shields will come to mind. Because Claressa is a two-time undisputed champion in her own right, though the difference here is...
Three-time.
Claressa Shields, she moved down in weight to become an undisputed champion 2 times, whereas Katie would be moving up. And, in Claressa's undisputed run, at both weights, at 160 and 154, 7 of those alphabet titles she collected en route to becoming a 2-time undisputed champion, 7 of them were vacant, whereas Katie's not fighting for a vacant title or vacant titles. She didn't pick up vacant titles at lightweight, and if she moves up in weight for Chantel, well, none of those titles are vacant either. Chantel Cameron herself is an undisputed champion. Undisputed champion versus undisputed champion. It's the glaring difference between Katie Taylor's undisputed run and Claressa's. Through no fault of her own, it's not Claressa's fault that there isn't more depth at 154, 160, or 168 pounds. There just isn't. It's not her fault, but the quality of competition and the overall talent pool at those weights, it's shallow. Claressa saw herself become a 2-time undisputed champion, 3 times more recently with the Savannah Marshall fight. But you tell me, is Savannah Marshall an undisputed champion like Chantel Cameron? Was Christina Hammer? Was Marie-Eve Dicaire? Were any of those champions that Claressa fought, were they undisputed champions the same way that Chantel is an undisputed champion? The answer. I've always maintained that Claressa Shields, she's done a fantastic job of cleaning up things between 154 and 168 pounds, but the depth in those divisions, it's just not there. She's doing what she can. But that's why Claressa, after having debuted in 2016, the same year as Katie Taylor, that's why she only has 13 professional contests to Katie Taylor's 22. There just ain't that many girls up there to fight. Excellent resume that she may have. Hers pales in comparisons to Katie. Katie has fought the better fighters, the much better fighters overall. Chantel Cameron, the super lightweight division's undisputed champion, could be the next. And Alicia Baumgartner too, depending on when that Hyun Mi Choi fight happens. She could be another undisputed champion in the running for a Taylor fight as well. Stylistically, the Cameron fight is actually a more winnable fight for Katie than the Alicia Baumgartner fight. Yeah, that's right. Alicia Baumgartner, she has all the characteristics and traits of a pure boxer, whereas Chantel Cameron is your, according to Hoyle, boxer-puncher. And Katie Taylor, given what she's shown in the past, she stands a better chance of beating a boxer-puncher than a pure boxer. I've not actually seen Katie Taylor in there with a defensively minded, a defensively responsible, mobile, and athletic pure boxer. So at least based on styles, the Cameron fight is a little bit more winnable than the Baumgartner fight. It's a little bit more winnable, but that doesn't make it easy. That doesn't mean it's easy. To be completely honest with you, that doesn't even mean Katie Taylor wins. But Chantel Cameron, to the eye, she is a little slower than Katie Taylor. They're both very well-schooled boxers. Don't misunderstand me. But styles, after all, they do make fights. And Chantel Cameron being the boxer-puncher, Katie Taylor having it within her repertoire to be that economic pure boxer, boxing from the outside. Boxing from the outside on the balls of her feet, on her toes, in and out, firing those fast flurries from the outside coming in, then safely bouncing out of range. Katie Taylor, like many of the special fighters, very special fighters, she actually has two base styles. She can be that pure boxer when she wants to be, fighting from the outside in order to slow a fight down and limit her opponent's offensive opportunities. She can do that, but she can also be that boxer puncher that, whilst being defensively responsible, can play at the angles and find ways to take it to her quarry, to her opponent. Now, Chantel Cameron, she's got some advantages. I think she's a bigger puncher than Katie Taylor, naturally bigger and younger. She hasn't been in as many wars as Katie. She's not as war-torn, and she's got a fresher set of legs. Even though up until this point, she really has been your according to Hoyle boxer puncher, who's to say that opposite the ring Katie Taylor, she won't show another layer to her game, hit another gear? The special fighters, the really special fighters. Good ones, I mean the really good ones, they usually have two base styles, kind of like how Canelo can be a boxer puncher and a counter puncher, but he can also be a pressure fighter. Or Floyd Mayweather, who started out as a very spiteful, lightning fast boxer puncher, bad intentions, and eventually developed into an economic pure boxer who focused on defense and accuracy. The really special fighters, they've got two base styles. So who's to say that Chantel don't got two base styles and she just hasn't had to use the other one yet? Chantel Cameron, she does have time on her side. She's a few years younger than Katie. So, I mean, Katie Taylor's got options. Chantel Cameron is one among them, and now that she's the super lightweight division's undisputed champion, I feel like she's closer now to that Katie Taylor fight than she ever has been in the past. Don't forget the scheduling. Alicia Baumgartner might be an option for Katie after the undisputed fight with Choi, but she hasn't had that fight yet, and we don't know when that's going to be. Amanda Serrano might also be an option for Katie, but the same applies to her. She's supposed to be having an undisputed fight with Eric Cruz at featherweight, and we don't know when that fight is going to go down. We don't know when that's going to be. Chantel, pretty sure her schedule's clear for early next year, so maybe Katie fights her at Croke Park. We'll see what happens. Men's light heavyweight news per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn has stated that he believes Canelo Alvarez's next fight will take place in May. He said Canelo has been told he should be fine to resume punching in 2 months after he underwent successful wrist surgery following his trilogy win over Gennady Golovkin. And I made my feelings felt about a potential Canelo Alvarez versus Dimitri Bivol rematch. I made my feelings known here on the channel ahead of this past weekend's fight. I don't see a need for it. Dimitri Bivol beat Canelo Alvarez comprehensively. He beat him decisively. And, you know, Canelo Alvarez, I don't know what he could do differently in a second fight. I don't know what he could do differently in a rematch. And you know what they were saying ahead of this weekend's fight? You know what they were saying? Eddie Hearn revealed that we could see Canelo defend his undisputed super middleweight titles against Chris Eubank Jr. I vaguely recall that Canelo Alvarez said a few months ago he wants to fight in the United Kingdom. He wants to fight in front of that audience, described as the best boxing fans in the world. Presumably for next year, here this year, there are rumors and rumblings that Chris Eubank Jr. may be taking on his countryman, Liam Beefy Smith. What would be billed as a middleweight contest. On the Sky Sports side of things, I've no doubt, on the Sky Sports and Boxer side of things, the now defunct Conor Benn fight, I don't imagine that's a fight that either Chris Eubank Jr. or Matchroom for that matter, I don't imagine that's a fight they're going to revisit anytime soon, if ever at all. So Chris Eubank Jr. can keep busy with Liam Smith, and if he beats that guy, he may land the Canelo Alvarez fight next year. This year, we're going to be seeing unbeaten Zach Parker take on seasoned veteran John Ryder later on this month on the 26th at the O2 Arena in London to crown a WBO interim champion, what would be the mandatory challenger for Canelo Alvarez's brown belt. This is yet another potential opponent option for Canelo that would see him traveling abroad, across the pond, across the Atlantic Ocean to potentially fight on UK soil. And given everything that Canelo Alvarez has already done for the sport here in America, I don't see why not. I don't see why he shouldn't do this.
What about Jermall Charlo?
What about Jermall Charlo? The man hasn't fought at all this year. What about him?
What about David Benavidez?
Fuck David Benavidez.
Fuck him.
All he did this entire year was fight David Lemieux, a very past-it, over-the-hill David Lemieux who had no business campaigning as a super middleweight but was left with no choice because he outgrew the middleweight division. Listen, I ain't got no time for no David Benavidez, I'm sorry. If Canelo fights him, he fights him, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. He's done nothing to make himself stand out, nothing special, nothing extraordinary. There's nothing extraordinary about David Benavidez. Yeah, as a boxing fan, I could go for Canelo versus Benavidez, of course, but as a boxing fan, I could go for Canelo versus the winner of this fight. They're interchangeable. They're all interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. Canelo versus Eubank, Canelo versus the winner of Parker versus Ryder, or Canelo versus Benavidez, or Canelo versus Cherry Charlo. I could go for any one of those fights because it's Canelo! People are paying to see, not them! I'm not actually interested in Canelo Alvarez returning to the light heavyweight division for a second fight with Dimitri. As far as Dimitri, the only fight I want to see him in is the undisputed light heavyweight title fight with his countryman, arch nemesis, Artur Beterbiev. That's the only fight to make at 175 pounds. And it's about time because Artur's not getting any younger. He's got a mandatory title defense early next year against the United Kingdom's own Anthony Yarde. And if he splatters that guy, the way most people think he's going to splatter that guy, time is of the essence. Make the fucking Bivol fight. I have no desire to see Canelo Alvarez return to the light heavyweight division to take on Dimitri Bivol, at least not at this time. The only fight at 175 that's on my mind is this one, Beterbiev versus Bivol. Stylistically, I don't even know how much Canelo Alvarez can change. What can he hope to do differently in a second fight with Dimitri that he didn't do the first time out?
I just think, since we've seen so many fights not happen and Beterbiev being with Top Rank ESPN, would that be a challenge to make a fight with him?
No, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, we're not going to stop Dimitri Bivol for taking that opportunity through a TV situation. There's an easy deal to make there with Top Rank and DAZN. Maybe we speak to DAZN, and say, could he ever fight on ESPN or vice versa? I don't know. But at the end of the day, DAZN have been very good to Dimitri over these last couple of fights, and obviously we want to stay and support them. There's a dual broadcast, there's other options, but we don't want to get in the way at the same time. I think that's a real problem with boxing, that the broadcaster will stop a fight from happening, and DAZN have never really done that. I mean, they're new to the sport, they're fresh, they haven't yet been tarred with the bitterness brush, so they tend to accept that fighters want to make the big fights. And listen, Dimitri Bivol against Beterbiev is an unbelievable fight. Unbelievable fight. Two Russian fighters for the undisputed light heavyweight title. And I have to say, being honest, a year and a half ago, I would say that on paper, Beterbiev was a favourite in that fight. Not anymore. I honestly believe Dimitri Bivol is far and away the best 175 pounder in the world. And as good and as dangerous as Beterbiev is, I do not believe he will beat Dimitri Bivol at all.
Dimitri Bivol, leading up to this weekend's fight himself, stated that he's more interested in boxing Artur Beterbiev, his countryman, for the undisputed crown than giving Canelo Alvarez another shot. Giving that guy a second fight. You hear it here from Eddie Hearn, you're hearing it here, that DAZN aren't going to stand in the way of that. If Dimitri has to cross the street to get that fight, they won't hold him back. They didn't hold back Alicia Baumgartner from crossing over to the Sky Sports and Boxer side of things to unify titles with Mikaela Mayer. And they're singing a familiar tune here, Eddie Hearn is. They're not going to stand in Dimitri's way. If that's the way it has to happen for the fight to go down, then that's the way it will happen. You heard what Bob Arum has said in the past. They're not sending Artur to DAZN. And I said it here on the channel myself. It's hard to imagine that they would. On the heels of those comments, the only way I see the fight happening is if Dimitri crosses the street. Sounds a lot like DAZN are going to let him. I don't know, maybe DAZN concedes the U.S. rights to the fight, the U.S. broadcast rights to ESPN, and they show the fight, they air it everywhere else in the world. They can work it out. And the important thing is they're not going to stand in the way. They're not going to stop Dimitri Bivol from pursuing that last brass ring. And with those things in mind and that being said, the ball's really in Top Rank's court to deliver this thing. Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev. In spite of being unbeaten champions, they don't strike me as the kind of fighters to make a big fuss in negotiations. It's all about what's this fight worth to Top Rank? What are they willing to do? What are they willing to pay, I should say, in order to see the fight come into fruition, get the fight over. the line.
I still favor Dmitry Bivol to win this thing. I always have, and it's mostly because of Artur's age and the fact that he's an injury-prone fighter. The fact that
Dmitry Bivol's got a very pesky base style that could be difficult for an aging fighter on aging legs to try and keep up with. Now, as far as pressure fighters go in the sport of boxing here today, I firmly believe that Artur Beterbiev is the best pressure fighter in the sport. More nuanced and streamlined than the very crude Joe Smith Jr. or Zurdo Ramirez.
he's a lot craftier than those guys, and he hits harder than both.
Artur Beterbiev's arguably the most destructive puncher in the entire light heavyweight division, if not the most destructive puncher in the entire division. This guy ain't gotta hit you but once to get your attention and 2 times to take you out.
But in Dmitry Bivol, he'd be opposite the ring one of the most defensively responsible fighters, not just in the light heavyweight division, but in the sport today. Statistically, Dmitry Bivol ranks in as one of the fighters that gets hit the least in the entire sport of boxing.
A defensive specialist with not just hand speed, but foot speed as well. And I imagine that the strategy employed to defeat Artur Beterbiev would be somewhat similar to what we saw yesterday, because you can't run from Artur. You can't get away from this guy. You do that, he's going to catch up and he's going to take you out. Just ask Marcus Brown.
It takes a delicate balance of both offense and defense, toggling between the two seamlessly, alternating to offset the pressure and the power.
It's like I told you in my previous video. Opposite the ring of pressure fighter, you've got to alternate, because too much defense, too much time on the back foot, too much time backpedaling and circling away, that pressure fighter's going to outwork you. And against Artur, eventually he's going to catch up and eventually he's going to take you out. Too much defense
And you end up like Marcus Brown. Too much offense and you end up like Joe Smith Jr., Callum Johnson.
you get taken out. I imagine that Dmitry Bivol's strategy to beat Artur Beterbiev would be somewhat similar to what we saw yesterday with Zurdo Ramirez, in the sense that he's got to stay with the guy and stay on him, slipping his punches.
I think Dimitri's faster than Artur. I think he's got faster hands than that guy. And if he stays with him and slips his punches, counters in kind,
Stays with him, stays on him, on his toes, on the balls of his feet. As Artur takes a step forward,
pops him with a counter shot, stops his momentum, gets out of the way, then gets out of the way safely.
he's got to do this for 12 rounds. And I know that it's easier said than done, but isn't everything.
Yeah, Artur, he's tricky in his own way. He's tricky in his own right.
One of the main components about this fight that makes me favor the freshness and defensive responsibility of Dmitry Bivol are his legs. You know, he's a younger guy than Artur, whereas Artur, he's 37 years old now, standing on 37-year-old legs. Could be 38 by the time these two boys meet.
I'm going to trust a guy with 38-year-old legs to catch up to and keep on this guy? I don't think so.
I know Artur's got the kind of power where he can finish fight rather quickly. He can, but how many guys has he fought that are as defensively responsible as this guy and as fleet of foot? I favor Dmitry.
I still favor Dmitry Bivol to win.